We've said it 100 times, but it just keeps being true. Nikola Jokic is better than ever. We'll talk about how on Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us, making us your first listen. We appreciate you guys being with us on whatever platform that you've chosen. You can spend your day and your time however you choose, and you choose to spend it with us, and for that, we're really grateful. You can join us on whatever platform that you want, whether you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We do appreciate those 5-star reviews. You can join the live show on YouTube. Go to youtube.com/LockedOnNuggets and hit the subscribe button. And turn on notifications. You can join the live show when we go live throughout the week. We appreciate you guys being with us. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. My name is Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network, joined by Adam Mares.
Don't you love that you have a brand, a Red Bull brand?
I gotta get the sponsorship.
That's so true. You're right.
I've genuinely thought about reaching out and being like, hey,
I
drink a lot. I subsist on your product, so it feels like we should be.
Oh no. What happened?
Also talk about Julian Strawther, and we'll get to a little bit of Warriors Nuggets preview as well. Let's start right here. So, Adam, you were you asked Malone about this, and on what day is today? On Monday's game, and
me and Matt, these are our lives.
What day?
We work till 2 a.m. Sometimes we're up early, or all kinds of crazy hours.
So. On Monday, you asked Malone after the game, after Jokic's another incredible game from Nikola, about if he sees that he's better. And Malone commented about how he's more present in the moment emotionally. He's more active as a leader. That was the challenge for Malone in preseason, was for him to be more of a vocal leader. And I think a lot of that is I think Malone in the moment of because Malone has to focus on how the team plays, that he has a hard time. He doesn't sit down and just be like, I'm going to watch all of Nikola's possessions, right? That's not how he looks at or approaches the game. And this wasn't how he intended it, but he did touch on something that I think really defines to me the difference in Nikola Jokic this year versus last year versus the MVP season, or the second MVP season versus the first one versus the 2019 run or 20. He talked about presence, and Adam, to me, that's the biggest thing here is that Nikola has reached a point where when he's on the floor, it is different for all of the other players, the 4 other Nuggets players and the 5 other opponents, where when he steps on the court, it's not just another guy. There's a presence and gravity that he carries with him that's intimidating to the opponent, and it's encouraging to his team. And it was always they felt like they had a good chance, and he was going to set them up on all these things. But it's different now in that Jokic is Harrison posted the play of him directing the entire sequence in that play, and he'll do that from time to time, and it's not uncommon. But we've always talked about on this show Jokic's control of the game. It has transcended now to that LeBron level of there is a presence when he is on the court that honestly feels pretty indomitable.
Am I crazy for saying I feel like it's above that? and here's what I mean. And here's what I mean. Some of this is just cultural of the last 20 years are different than the previous 20 years, where people always talk about Michael Jordan as people feared him. You feared Michael. People didn't fear LeBron. Some of this, I think, is just the internet age and the way the world evolved from the LeBron era to this era. But I think people fear Jokic. This is the difference between previous seasons and this one. To me, is Jonas Valanciunas is a really good player. He's not a star, but he's a really good player. He looks so demoralized. I don't want to say he looked afraid of Jokic, but he certainly looked like it didn't matter. He felt he had a sense about him in that game of, what am I even doing out here? Like, what am I doing? I'm not making any impact. He fouled out. Jokic is getting whatever shots he wants on him. You mentioned the directing traffic plays like that. The entire team is like scrambling right into his traps. I just feel like Jokic last year, maybe it was winning the title, maybe it was the way he did it, but I feel like last year there was not this respect level for him from or fear factor from the guys he was going up against.
I agree.
And at the same time, there wasn't this killer aspect from Jokic where he was like, I know you're afraid of me, so I'm going to go after this. And this year, that's what's different, as I feel like the guys that he's going up against are looking at it like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what I'm doing out here. And I just hope he doesn't do something that makes me look too bad.
I totally agree with you in that there's a real there's fear. There's also, I noticed in both the Pelicans game, the Jazz game, that and the Mavs game was the other one I noticed this in. When he checks back in second quarter, fourth quarter, like I'm watching the opponent's reactions, and there you see the thing that like LeBron did with Kawhi a couple of years ago when Kawhi checked back in. Like Jokic checks back in, and they're just like,
yeah, all right,
like
fun's
okay.
over.
Yeah, fun's over. And the Nuggets bench has been really good compared to expectations, but there's a lot of discussion now about, because of this level that he's played at, and you've kind of pointed out. I will say this: when Adam says things like this is the best that he's ever played, or this is the best that maybe anybody has ever played, I take it very seriously, because Adam is, as much as you've always been, you were day one on him, you also have a really it's impossible for you to not assess him accurately, if that makes sense. Like, I've never seen, like, you don't give him a pass when it's like, yeah, he's
sure,
like that's not what you've ever done. And more to the point though, is when you specifically are just like, this was incredible, because there's nights where I've been like, God, Jokic was a monster, and you're like, yeah, he was good.
Yeah.
But the way that you've described the back-to-back Mavs Bulls and then this last game versus Pelicans is a little bit different.
It's to me, it's a 3-game stretch, because he's been good all year. But before that point, the Lakers game, he was pretty dominant. But the games in between that and this last 3-game stretch, to me, were like regular Jokic. Like, oh man, he's dominant. He's the MVP. He's this or that. These last 3 have just represented to me something else. And maybe it's an anomaly. I mean, it's only a 3-game stretch, but it just more serious, more buttoned up. We mentioned these things out of training camp and out of the preseason, where it's like, man, he's not, he's doing things full right now. He's going hard for whatever reason, and we couldn't figure out why. And I really do just wonder if how they talk about a runner's high. I've never had a runner's high, Matt. I've never run far enough or hard enough to have a runner's high, but I hear it's a thing that you get in the zone where it's like euphoric to be pushing yourself to the limit that you're pushing yourself. I kind of feel like Jokic has a runner's high, where he's been dominant, he's winning, and he's reached this level where it's lifting him now to almost push himself even beyond that. And Matt, and I appreciate you saying that, Matt, about me and how I analyze Jokic, but I will say this: I've always pushed the goalpost or tried to look around the corner with him. So I've always been a year or so ahead of the narratives, and thankfully Jokic has always proven me right. I've always said he's here, but I feel like he's going here. Right now, when I say that I'm not sure LeBron dominated at this stage the way that Jokic is dominating at this stage, I mean it. LeBron athletically dominated these different things, but he didn't dominate all the chess pieces to this extent until later on. The Cavs years is where I feel like he really kind of understood how to manipulate the way Jokic perfectly manipulates everything. And my big thing is Jokic going into killer mode, starting to put fear in people to where you're seeing where people are a little bit concerned. I just wonder if the next phase of this is a whole new stratosphere, even for Jokic, where it's very rare that an entire league looks at a guy and is like, that guy's a little scary.
I try not to get caught in recency bias, because I know it's how real it is. Like, it's just, it's always real. And then you kind of go like, I know recency bias, and it's like, well, no, like that's the whole thing, is influencing you. What I'll say is I think I probably still put 12, 13, 13, 14 LeBron like a half notch ahead of Joker. But like, that's not an insult. That's literally the best basketball I've seen played since I was a child. Like, and I would actually argue pretty definitively that LeBron's control over the game and Jokic's control over the game was substantially higher than Jordan's. Like Jordan was Jordan, and Jordan will always be Jordan, and Jordan is the GOAT for various reasons to various people. Maybe he's not. I don't really care. The point here is that to if I'm like, yeah, no, I think Joker's playing at that tier. That is, I don't know. Like, I have no other basketball compliment I can issue that's higher. Like, there's nothing else I can do.
And the thing is that people will say, LeBron athletically was so dominant, and I think it's true. Obviously, 2013 LeBron is one of the most athletically gifted basketball players the league's ever seen, and also just so happened to be the most talented or whatever. But what I'll say is that Jokic is now athletically dominant, not in a runs fast way, although he does outrun his opponents up and down the court, but he is so strong. Valanciunas is strong. Valanciunas is a top 10 strongest player in the NBA, top 15, somewhere in there. Jokic made him look like Chet Holmgren. Yeah. Like Jokic right now might be the physically strongest player or hardest player to sort of like hold. And that to me is why you would never compare him to Shaq, because Shaq will spin and dunk on you. But he is like Shaq in that you need the strongest people in the NBA just to hold him.
Yeah, and I want to be clear on this. Like, none of these players that he's clowning are like, or most of them are not playing badly. Like JB did everything you're supposed to do. Yeah. And there's nothing to be done. Yeah. And it's just incredible. I will say also, I asked Malone about this. They're in this tough schedule stretch, and the Pelicans game was another one. And you mentioned Jokic running. Like I want to give also Jokic a high level of praise here in that they're not winning off of effort. Like, they are superior. Yeah. They are also busting their ass when they need to. When the opportunity arises, when they sense a moment of weakness, they are running the ball down their throat. And you saw it on all those sequences with like the fast breaks and stuff like that with Jokic, and he's moving quick. Like, he is playing with such intensity when he does play, and he deserves a lot of credit for that, for not easing into the season and dealing with what is a tough stretch of adversity schedule-wise without Jamal and approaching it that way.
Adelman said he gave him a B- or something for conditioning in the preseason. Jokic looks like he's in such great shape right now. Yeah. He's running and playing so hard.
On the other side, on the other end of the spectrum, we've got Julian Strawther, the rookie, who's playing absolutely phenomenal. We'll get Adam's thoughts on that as well as what I think. And we'll talk a little bit more about Colin Gillespie and his role at the bench as Jamal Murray will continue to miss time. We'll do that up next on Locked On Nuggets. Right now, I need to tell you about Prize Picks. Prize Picks, you're not going to have more fun playing daily fantasy sports than with Prize Picks. You just you just select 2 players. You can select up to 5, pick more or less on their projected stats, and you place your entry, and you go up to 25 times your money. With basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League. That's a league created specifically for combo projections that include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. So you can do Jokic rebounds and Russell Wilson completions at a combo and get way more on. I'm being serious. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. I'm, by the way, going to be playing Michael Porter Jr. over on rebounds again. He's been absolutely fantastic rebounding since he kind of got out of his mini slump early in the season. I'll be on him on that. Plus, I think he actually knocks down his threes tonight versus the Warriors. Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured for football and basketball games. If you've got a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an insurance policy. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us, making this part of your day. World's Finest coming at you on Wednesday before the Nuggets take on the Warriors tonight. We'll preview that in the next segment. Tomorrow, we'll have a recap episode breaking down what happened in the Warriors game. I will probably do that tomorrow morning solo, and then Swipe and I'll be with you on Friday. All right, let's talk about Julian Strawther, my man. So, second year in a row that – so, like, I want to pose this one to you just because – Julian deserves his flowers, and he'll continue to get them. Like, he's a good player. I think he's shown that in preseason. Had a obviously monster game the other night versus the Pels. There will be a lot of time for us to talk about what Strawther's doing well. I want to ask you this question. The old kind of talking point was that Malone wouldn't play the rookies. And I always kind of said, like, look, if they do the right things, he'll play them. If they can play the way that they need to at the level that they're at, he'll play them. Who gets more credit for Strawther being in the rotation over Justin Holiday and getting the kind of opportunity he has? Calvin for picking him and selecting him and identifying him, or Malone for, on a veteran team, giving him this kind of opportunity? They both deserve credit. Who deserves more?
Man, I kind of don't like the question, because I don't know if it makes sense, like, to pit it against each other in that way. I will say that you hope you hope for there being perfect synergy there. Calvin also selected Hunter Tyson and Jalen Pickett, who are not playing. A two-way player, Colin Gillespie is. So I guess you give the credit for picking Julian Strawther, a guy who looks ready to play in the NBA right out of the package, the same way you would maybe not credit for not having a backup point guard that the coach trusts to go right now. So,
right.
So I don't know. I guess I would go with Calvin, but I give Malone a lot of credit, though. I will say this. Peyton Watson played on night one, and I did not think he would. And I think it's been very important that we are 8 games into the Peyton Watson rookie season. I mean, effective rookie season. Julian Strawther has played real minutes already in 8 games. I give Michael Malone a lot of credit for that. I think it's important. And even Colin Gillespie, there's coaches that would probably go to just riding Reggie for 40 minutes or some other things. And he's like, you know what? We're going to stick out a guy with no NBA experience in a high leverage situation and trust him to perform. And he did.
Calvin specifically mentioned 3-point shooting and that they needed another shooter as a big reason. And I want to I am not a shot oriented analyst. Like, I'm not as interested in shot stuff as a lot of other people are. There's just so much about the game that I like more. But in particular, those deep threes off of DHO actions that Strawther's taking, and the defense, like, again, these are plays that both stem or push momentum, and they're plays that impact the opponent, and that they're like, God, are you this guy? Like, I just survived 8 minutes of Jokic, and now I've got this kid bombing from 30. That 3-point accuracy really helps, because that second unit does have to get stops and run. And they are low on shot creation, but you can manage some of that if your 3-point volume and accuracy is good. And Strawther fits into that mode and mold perfectly. And that's been, like, I think, a big benefit for what he's done. I've liked his floater game since Summer League. It's just one of my, like, if you have that as a baseline, what can you do? I can shoot off of quick catch. Like, I move into the shot as I'm catching and directly into my motion, and I can hit that consistently. And if they close, I can pump fake drive, hit floater. That's, like, enough to get you in almost any rotation in the league, as long as you're okay defensively. Yeah. And that baseline quality of the two, like that combination of the two, to me is what makes Strawther not only playable, but a real benefit to this team and helps that second unit, especially when I think that Christian's kind of struggling right now.
Yeah, I mean, the floater, it was funny after the game, he said he trusts it more than his jumper. He trusts it more than any part of his game. He trusts his floater, which I don't know if I buy that. But you know what? He does trust it a lot. I mean, he goes to it, he makes it a lot, and he seems comfortable with it. But to me, Matt, the thing about Strawther that I love, in addition to his size, which is just such a huge thing, like Jordan Hawkins had a great game the other night. I was very impressed with him. He's so tiny that you're always going to go to that whenever you talk about him. You know, you're going to mention it. Julian Strawther is enormous. He's 6'7".
Yeah.
You know, like, he's taller than Kobe Bryant. You know, think about that, or Michael Jordan, or this. So he's a tall player with lots of length, and then he has all these things. But the thing I love about him is he just understands. The best shooters seem to know how to get open, because they just know their whole lives they play wide receiver. They're not running backs. They're not with the ball in their hand. They're like, I have to run to get open, and then the pass finds me and I launch it. He's really good at that. He cuts well. He reads the court well. His timing is great. His release is great. He anticipates when the ball is about to come to him. one of the most maddening things, and Michael Porter does this more than you would think. One of the most maddening thing is when a player is wide open and not ready for the shot, and then the ball comes to them and they're like, oh my God, really? And then they don't make it because it's like Julian is like, if you watch him, he is like looking at Jokic like ready to go because he knows the moment the ball gets there, it's got to go up. And I honestly think Julian Strawther is going to be a great player for the Nuggets, a major impact piece for the Nuggets for years to come.
It's really impressive given where they've got him in the draft. Again, just like I'm spitballing this based off of what I've seen before. I don't have the exacts, but it's basically the drop off is like top 3. You're very likely to get a star player. 3 through 11, you're likely to get, or 4 through 11, you're very likely to get a starter. 11 through 20, you're likely to get a rotation player, but not necessarily a starter. That back end 10 is real hit or miss. Like it's just real hit or miss. And the odds of finding a top 7 rotation guy is honestly pretty low. Which is one of the reasons why I'm always kind of like, I don't know. I think we kind of, when we have the conversations, if you're going to be, if you know that that you're trading a pick that's in the high 20s, I'm like, I don't know how much value you're really trading there.
Right.
And to convert these into these type of players where, again, like I've made the case like, hey, they should have gotten some veterans. What about Ish Wainwright? What about this guy? What about that guy? What about this? All these guys that I know. And it's like, look, Strawther, I think is already better than them because Strawther is a guy that can go out, like just scoring production wise, the stuff is huge, And again, like, I will admit that we're so early in the season. He's played so few minutes. I haven't like dug down on his defense, and he's going to make mistakes because he's a rookie. That's normal. That's okay.
Although I think fewer than most rookies. That's an important piece of all this.
That's the thing is like, there are not sequences where I'm just like, oh no, like there are certain guys. And I really just, I do, again, this is not you mentioned that not a fair to pit them against each other. Here's another one for you. Like, Bones would have taken some of these sequences. He would take those deep threes, but he would take them off the dribble, which are always almost inherently going to be lower percentage shots. And Bones' defensive stuff was always very much like, oh, this may never get good. Like this will probably never be good. And Strawther is just so much more solid. And for this Nuggets team, that's what they need. Like he fits what they need really well for where they're at in the process, which is championship contention.
And I'll tell you, I know Calvin is big on pedigree, and a lot of this is, did you play at a major school where there were expectations and tradition and those things? And like Gonzaga is one of those, right? That's a premier school that has a tradition of playing the right way and this or that. Julian Strawther talked about this at the draft and talked about this in training camp where his rookie season or his freshman season at Gonzaga, he didn't play, and it was expected he wouldn't. So coming into the NBA, he didn't have this entitlement or expectation that he was going to be a certain thing. Like, I think that is part of the calculus of, hey, are you comfortable knowing that you have to earn it and that things are going to go slow for you most likely? And he seems to be one of those guys that is comfortable with it. And obviously Bones was not, as we found out. But, to me, his minutes right now are so great because what I love about Michael Malone, and maybe I would even change my answer now, is Michael Malone has been giving him minutes in the first half and making him earn them in the second. And I think that is both great for pushing a player and saying, hey, focus on the right things. But it also takes pressure off Julian. Like, in a weird way, it's like, look, we need to be able to win these games without you. But if you help us, it's a bonus. And I just feel like that's the sweet spot. And last game, he helped Denver win that. I think they probably would have won it without him, but they won it by 20 points because of him.
Yeah. On the other side, the Nuggets take on the Warriors in a game that's going to be possibly missing multiple starters, but still will be a really interesting matchup of two of the best teams in the Western Conference. We'll break it down in a preview fashion up next on Locked On Nuggets. Let's talk about FanDuel Sportsbook. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. I love the Bengals this week. I think the Texans are very overrated. I think they're good, but this line doesn't make any sense to me, and especially on the money line. Like, I've thought about teasing it. So if you're going to take up that promo, I think the Bengals money line is a really good one. It's not that the Texans are bad. I think they're pretty good. They're really well coached, but I also think that the Bengals, I think, are still dealing with a little bit of power rating discrepancy from early in the season when Burrow wasn't right. he's right now. I think this Bengals team is really good, and they got a legit chance at the Super Bowl. The app's so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us. Wrapping up here with Adam Mares on a Wednesday, hours before the Nuggets take on too many hours, I will note, for an 8 o'clock start for Warriors Nuggets. For those of you just as like a little behind the curtain, it's not necessarily the late start. It's that there's a weird effect that anyone that goes to the games will tell you. If we show up at 5:15 for Malone's press conference for a 7 o'clock start, the 6:15 to 8 o'clock differential feels like 1.75 times longer than the gap between 5:15 and 7. I don't know why, but there's like a time dilation effect, and it results in all of us being like, oh my God, the game hasn't started yet. So gonna be a late night with me driving home in the snow.
Is it snowing tonight?
It's gonna snow tonight. Not much. The Springs is gonna get really hit, and if anybody in the mountains are gonna get dumped on. They're getting.
You ruined my day, dude. What the heck?
Well, that's what I'm here for, Adam. I'm not here to make it better. Let's talk about the Warriors and the Nuggets. So, Draymond Green's questionable tonight with personal reasons. I'm not sure what's going on with Dre. He's questionable to play. Jamal Murray, Malone, if you haven't heard, has said it's not gonna be a short-term thing with Murray, and we kind of hinted at that like, look, hamstrings are tricky. The biggest thing with the hamstring is that you could probably you can return on it in 2 weeks. Like, I wouldn't have expected him for 2 weeks period. You can return on it in 2 weeks, but your injury risk is high, especially if you're a guard, especially if you're a starter. So like heavy minutes for a guard is not a really good situation. And for him to return to what he needs to return as, like, it's probably going to be like, I'd say like a month is probably like what I'm projecting is they're probably going to go now through the beginning of December without him. If it gets into the January range.
Well, you know that the in-season tournament is in 1 month.
That's accurate.
So if Denver makes it to the in-season tournament, would he come back for the tournament portion of it?
No.
You don't think?
No.
I'll bet you he would. First of all, hold up. Are there going to be a lot of attention on the tournament games?
Yes.
Will there be a lot of media and fanfare and a big stage? Like, come on, man.
Yeah.
If the Nuggets make the tournament, Murray is coming back.
But you're forgetting the key rule here, which is that NBA players never want to show they care.
Well, hold on a second. There's $500,000 at stake too. Like,
okay. All right. Fair enough.
I honestly think this is setting up for Murray's return for the in-season tournament. He goes full bubble Murray or finals Murray. Turns out in-season tournament Murray. And there you go.
That's true. Look, if Jamal Murray on his contract wins $500,000, he won't have to go to the ATM to put his walking around money. It's insane how much these guys make. I just keep thinking like 500,000 is probably like what Aaron Gordon spends on like a piece of jewelry. Like that keeps like rattling around in my brain, and I'm just like, what am I doing?
There is a chance that a player for whatever team wins the in-season tournament spends that much money in the party for the celebration of the in-season tournament.
100%. The matchup tonight, I think, is really fascinating with or without Draymond. Steph Curry is
good shooter.
Pretty good. He's pretty good at the shooting hoops. The thing with Curry that's most impressive to me is there is usually kind of like a stagnation, at least in terms of regular season performance, as guys get older. And Curry is as good as he has honestly ever been. Like maybe 2016, just because it was so outrageous, but percentage-wise, volume, the quickness, the sharpness, there is. You cannot watch Steph Curry and not be amazed at what he does. People will just, there will be focus on he made another three. It's all of the work that goes into it. And if you're watching tonight, that's what I would tell you is like, root for the Nuggets, but watch Curry on every sequence and look at how much work he puts into creating the shots that he does.
It's crazy.
Because so few players do. On the other hand, this team is whittle biddle. This is a very small team on the Warriors, and it cost them versus the Cavaliers. The response is, well, it cost them because the Cavaliers were able to hurt them defensively, and that won't be the case with the Nuggets, despite the fact that the Nuggets, by the way, have the second best half-court defense in the league currently. Do I expect them to finish there? No, but am I kind of interested in seeing what the length and size of Denver does to a very small and a half-step slower Warriors team? I am. I think this game is really fascinating. The line on it, by the way, is I think 3.5. I have it at Nuggets -4 on normalized home court. I haven't done like in-season numbers on home court yet because it's too early. If I use last season's numbers, I have Nuggets by 10 because the Nuggets were absurd last year at home. What are your kind of thoughts on this matchup and what you're going to be looking out for tonight?
Yeah, super interesting matchup to me. So the Draymond piece, by the way, would change a lot. If he's out tonight, I think, look, Draymond's a good defender, and I think that they have the requisite front court, at least in the starting lineup, to say, okay, that's interesting because you put Looney on Jokic, a big body who knows how to move his feet and position him, just play smart, and Draymond the roamer who will just not guard Aaron Gordon. Like, that's a tough matchup for the Nuggets.
Yeah.
If you don't, but they're also small behind that. So after, any minutes that don't feature them, Denver should absolutely crush. And they might crush those minutes even against those guys. If Draymond's out, that all goes out the window. Kevon Looney, as good as he is, can't handle Jokic one-on-one. There's not enough help side coming from anybody else. Kuminga's not, in my opinion, ready to be that type of player, not even close. So to me, Denver would have a huge inside advantage tonight should Draymond not play. They should have one either way, but should Draymond not play, they should have a huge inside advantage. But what's interesting to me is more about the defense of Steph Curry, because Denver, in my opinion, one of the things that's exciting about them is they have more defenders than ever, with Christian Brown coming into year 2, Peyton Watson entering the fold. And I'm really curious to see. Steph Curry is unlike any of the other players. They've done a good job against a bunch of different scorers so far in the early go of this year. Desmond Bane, Eve Zion the other day, a bunch of different types. Steph is a different type we haven't seen yet. And I'm just curious to see who guards him well, and how Denver does with the various bodies they can throw at him.
A key thing tonight is honestly going to be this. Chris Paul they have destroyed in the Chris Paul minutes, and Paul's coming off the bench, and Paul has been extremely low turnover this year. So like that honestly is going to be a little bit of a battle here, especially without Jamal, right? You can't stagger Jamal against CP3 in those second unit minutes. So I'm going to be really interested to see how that looks with what the Nuggets bench has been so good. Can they keep that up versus a Warriors second unit that has been phenomenal, especially defensively? Like those two teams are going to be like, this is a little bit of a defensive battle because it's Chris Paul with Gary Payton II and sometimes Looney, and some of those other, like the rotation minutes have been really good in those second unit minutes. Dario Saric, they kind of play the same small ball switch five. So it's going to be interesting watching like Zeke Naji, Saric in those backup minutes. Curry's been playing on the same basic rotation alignment that Jokic has. So you're going to see
really,
yeah,
that's new, isn't it? Didn't he used to stagger? Okay,
yeah, he used to stagger, and now season he's playing heavy up front first quarter, exits about the 3-minute mark, comes back in 8-minute mark, plays the same thing that Jokic does. What also has been kind of interesting, I will note, is they've won the Curry Draymond minutes, but typically the Curry Draymond minutes are dominant. They haven't been so far this season. Their record is good, but this is like, if Draymond plays, this is like a real test. Now, also he's questionable with personal reasons, which I always kind of wonder, like, is he even in town? Like, that's a legitimate question here. And so, like, if he doesn't play, then that obviously changes that dynamic. But it is going to be kind of interesting in that the Draymond no Steph minutes have been really negative, which is fascinating because last year it was the opposite. Shows you how unstable these things can be. But
and just to be clear, the Jokic Murray minutes so far this year haven't been dominant either.
Right.
So, like, sometimes it's just a small sample size, or whatever. +7 net rating, which is good, but usually Jokic Murray is like +18. So that's off to a slower start. And I think that's just, small sample sizes.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, like I am always of the opinion that I'm like, look, I'm going to talk about these things because this is the data that we have,
Yeah.
but you have to understand that it hasn't been great. But as a kind of comparison point, by the way, you want to know how it's been? I thought they were still winning it. I was wrong. Steph, Draymond is minus 1.4 this year.
That's wild. That's really wild.
Again, small sample. They're going to be fine over the course of the season, but it'll be a really fascinating matchup, I think.
I want to see Colin Gillespie, by the way, if he plays tonight. I assume he's playing because he played well in the second half of last night, and Malone just seems to really – Malone, you can sometimes read into the comments. Malone keeps talking about how much the team trusts him and the team and this or that. So I kind of feel like Gillespie is going to get some run here. Chris Paul, that's a tough matchup. Even though he's older, it is a smaller guy. So I don't know if there's as much of a height advantage or disadvantage as there will be on some matchups. But nonetheless, it's going to be a tougher matchup. And, Chris Paul loves going at young point guards. Like, he just loves to be like, oh, this guy's inexperienced. Let me see if he knows how to do this.
Can I ask you, it's pointless to be like, who's going to guard Steph? I am at the point where it's understandable that people ask that because that's how we think of basketball. But I'm like,
right.
Guys, they're like, Curry's never going to not run off a screen.
Yeah, they're going to be a lot of switches.
Yeah, and so I do have a question for the Honey because you've think done more of the film work than I have so far. Is Denver capable of doing enough off-ball switches to handle that? Have they been good at those sequences?
I mean, I think so, especially their starting lineup. And guys like Christian Brown don't mess those up. You know who the guys that have stood out to me have messing up the most of those? Reggie Jackson.
Yeah,
number one. And I would say Peyton Watson, but Peyton Watson's been better than I would have expected at this stage. And then you have Michael Porter, who always, I think, still, makes those types of mistakes. Michael Porter's been great defensively against a lot of guys. Steph is a different type of defender. So this would test, like, not every player is a good defender for every other type of matchup. And Michael Porter has done a really good job against guys like Luka and LeBron and different players this year. Steph is a completely different type of challenge for him. And so I think he'll get tested tonight as well.
He won't. I want to make this very clear. Malone will not change the rotation. It will be the exact same guys. This is a game, though. Let me put it this way. If they were in a playoff series and it was like game 2, I would seriously consider bringing Reggie off the bench and starting Christian Brown.
For this matchup, it would be smart. Like, that would give you a lot of really good defenders. And honestly, I think Denver's going to play tonight. I'll bet you they get to lineups like that. One, just to get a read, even with Reggie, because I think they'll play with Reggie. But I'll bet they'll get to Peyton, Christian, Gordon lineups with Jokic out there just to see, like, we have all of our best defenders. You can't matchup hunt, and let's see if it stifles them. And it might. And if you can, here's what I'll say. This is why this game's interesting to me personally. Denver's been very good defensively this year. They look like a real defensive team. The Warriors challenge you in your execution of defense.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of curious to see if Denver is ready for that level of challenge. And by the way, Matt, this is the end of probably the most condensed portion of the schedule. They get 3 days off after this. I think it counts as 4 days because they don't play till Sunday. That's a nice break. I'm kind of curious to see, is Denver tired tonight? Are they motivated? Like, I want to see what they look like as this last challenge before it almost feels like a reset. Phase 1 ends today of the season. You move into phase 2 after this.
What a fun start to the season. All these games are good. The basketball is really great right now.
7-1 is great. 7-2 is not bad. It's pretty good. 8-1 would be like a really, really good start through 9 games.
Yeah, especially with the wins that they have on their resume. That's going to do it for Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow with a recap of the Warriors game. Make sure to tune in then. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. Hit us up with the 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts.
Haven't got one for a while.
Check out, I want to give a shout out to Adam. Check out the All NBA show on All Cities with Tim Legler and Adam Mara. If you haven't, or if you're not somebody, if you listen to the show, like, I always remember this because I've had people come up and be like, "Oh, I love your show. I listen to it every day." And I'm like, "Oh, great. Are you on Twitter?" And they're like, "No." And then, like, I have to remember, like, "Oh, not everyone's as online as I am." But if you're listening, go check out the All NBA pod with Adam Mares and Tim Legler. It's absolutely phenomenal. It was such a great listen. You're gonna get so much stuff out of it. It's real hoops talk. Go check that out. We'll be back tomorrow. Oh, and by the way, quick shout out to go check out Locked On Avalanche because the Avalanche scored 6 goals last night so that my wife was no longer sad. So shout out to Locked On Avalanche for covering the Avs. We'll see you guys again tomorrow. Thanks for joining us on Locked On Nuggets.